2024 is here. Is the American dream fading? Can China sustain its meteoric rise? Will the EU ever truly become one economic powerhouse? These are the questions that keep economists up at night. Join us as we paint the complete picture, leaving you breathless with its twists, turns, and the ultimate question: who will rule the economic kingdom? The world economic landscape has been reshaped over the past half-century by the remarkable growth trajectories of three giants: the United States, China, and the European Union. Let's embark on a journey to compare and contrast their journeys, delving into the engines that fueled their ascent, the challenges they faced, and the lessons learned for the future. Are you ready? In the 1970s, the economic terrain of our three protagonists lay vastly different. The U.S., scared by Vietnam and stagflation, grappled with economic uncertainty. China, under Mao's rigid grip, remained an isolated agrarian giant. Meanwhile, the fledgling European economic community, bruised by post-war scars, sought economic integration as a path to stability. This stage was set by momentous events: the Nixon shock severing the gold dollar peg, Deng Xiaoping's bold reformist turn, and the signing of the Treaty of Rome. These defining moments laid the groundwork for the divergent, yet intertwined, growth trajectories we'll now explore, starting with the dizzying heights and treacherous dips of GDP growth. Beginning with the U.S., steadfast growth with, some occasional turbulence, of course. The U.S. economy, like a seasoned marathon runner, maintained a steady pace of 2 to 3% annual GDP growth throughout the 70s and 80s. However, this path wasn't entirely smooth. The oil crisis of the 70s sent shockwaves through the global economy, temporarily stalling U.S. growth in 1974 and 1982. The dot-com bubble of the late 90s led to a brief yet exhilarating sprint, peaking at a 4.1% growth rate in 2000, followed by a sharp drop when the bubble burst in 2001. The 2008 financial crisis dealt a heavy blow, plunging the U.S. into a recession with a negative growth of 8.5% in 2009. The subsequent recovery was slow and steady, with growth remaining below 3% for most of the 2010s. Now moving to China. From sleeping giant to, the economic juggernaut we're seeing. China's growth story is arguably the most dramatic of the three. Prior to the 1980s, the country remained under the iron grip of a centrally planned economy, struggling to break above single-digit GDP growth. However, Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms in 1978 unleashed a sleeping giant. Openness to foreign investment and trade propelled China on a meteoric rise, with GDP growth consistently exceeding 10% throughout the 80s and 90s, peaking at a staggering 14.2% in 2007. This export miracle transformed China into the world's factory floor, churning out goods for insatiable global markets. However, the reliance on exports and heavy investment led to imbalances in recent years. As China shifts towards a consumption-driven model, its growth is moderated, settling around 6% in the 2020s. Coming to the EU now, it's a symphony of integration and challenges. The EU's growth trajectory reflects the complexities of integrating diverse economies. The early years saw moderate growth averaging around 2.5 to 3%, as member states focused on internal integration and navigating the common currency. The dot-com boom briefly propelled growth to 3.7% in 2000, but a subsequent slowdown and the 2008 financial crisis exposed vulnerabilities within the Eurozone. The Greek debt crisis and lingering imbalances resulted in sluggish growth throughout the 2010s, dipping below 1% in several years. Recent years have seen a modest rebound, with growth hovering around 2%. It's important to remember that these individual stories are not played out in isolation. Global events like oil crises, financial crashes, and technological advancements cast long shadows across all three regions. For instance, the 2008 financial crisis originated in the U.S., but triggered a domino effect, impacting growth in China and the EU. Similarly, China's rise as a manufacturing powerhouse reshaped global supply chains, affecting industries and job markets in all three regions. This initial glimpse into GDP growth is just the first page of a captivating story. Let's delve deeper into the factors behind these trends, analyzing the impact of policies, investments, technological innovations, and societal changes. We'll explore the complexities of trade relationships, inflation dynamics, and employment trends to paint a holistic picture of the economic journeys of the US, China, and the EU. While GDP measures expansion, it's inflation that tracks the dance of prices, a rhythm with highs and lows that can throw the entire economic orchestra out of tune. So far we saw how a galloping GDP can come crashing down, but sometimes even moderate growth gets overshadowed by the sting of rising prices. Let's explore how inflation unfolded in the US, China, and the EU, and the delicate tango central banks played to keep it in check. The US, accustomed to relative price stability, experienced spikes in the 70s fueled by oil crisis and the Vietnam War. The oil shocks of 1973 and 1979 sent inflation soaring to a peak of 14.6% in 1980, fueled by rising energy costs and government deficits. However, from the 1980s to 2000s, Volcker's aggressive interest rate hikes tamed inflation, bringing it down to around 3% for most of this period. The 2008 financial crisis and subsequent quantitative easing led to renewed inflation concerns. In 2022, inflation reached a 40-year high of 7.1%, driven by supply chain disruptions, pent-up demand, and energy price volatility. The Federal Reserve responded with rapid interest rate hikes, aiming to control inflation without triggering a recession. Whereas in China in the pre-reform era, price controls led to suppressed inflation, but shortages in black markets were common. Reaching a peak of 14.2% in 1993, the government implemented targeted price controls and managed growth policies to keep inflation down. Now in the 2020s, a slowing economy and targeted interventions kept inflation below 3% in recent years. However, global energy price rises and supply chain disruptions pushed inflation towards 3.8% in 2023, prompting targeted policy adjustments. In the EU, navigating currency unification, inflation ranged from moderate to low, averaging around 2% due to coordinated monetary policy within the European Economic Community and later the Eurozone. From 2008, the Eurozone crisis led to deflationary pressures in peripheral members. However, quantitative easing measures and rising global energy prices pushed inflation to a record high of 10.7% in the Eurozone in October 2023. The European Central Bank has begun raising interest rates, aiming to stabilize prices without jeopardizing economic recovery. We've seen how the U.S. grapples with managing high inflation from pandemic recovery and global disruptions, while China navigates balancing growth with price stability. The EU faces unique complexities within the Eurozone, requiring careful policy calibration to tame inflation without stoking economic disparities. Economic policies rarely dance in a vacuum. Let's now untangle the threads of political ideologies, leadership styles, and power struggles that shape the economic destinies of the US, China, and the EU. Buckle up, for we're about to witness a global political swing set against the backdrop of economic growth and challenges. In the US, the economic stage saw a dramatic swing from Reagan's bold deregulation in the 1980s, where tax cuts and a shrinking government fueled record growth, to Clinton's social safety net expansion under the Affordable Care Act. This pendulum swing, though, came with consequences. Deregulation widened the wealth gap, while increased social spending faced staunch Republican opposition, often leading to gridlock and uncertainty. The 2008 financial crisis sent the pendulum careening leftwards, with Obama's bailouts and infrastructure investments marking a shift towards intervention. However, Trump's era of tax cuts and protectionism swung the pendulum back, dividing opinions and leaving a mixed economic legacy. The current chapter under Biden sees renewed emphasis on social spending and infrastructure, aiming to address inequalities, but faces the persistent challenge of partisan gridlock. Across the Pacific, China's economic rise unfolded not under a swinging pendulum, but under the meticulous choreography of Deng Xiaoping's reforms. His opening up policy embraced markets while keeping key sectors firmly under state control, transforming China from a slumbering giant into an economic powerhouse. This pragmatic approach fueled a meteoric ascent, but environmental concerns and widening income inequality became visible scars on the country's rapid growth. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, the pendulum tilted inwards. National rejuvenation became the mantra, with increased emphasis on state control, domestic focus, and technological independence. This shift away from export-driven growth raises questions about its future trajectory, particularly in the face of concerns about human rights and geopolitical tensions. The EU's economic stage is a complex ballet, where 27 member states with diverse political cultures attempt to dance in unison. The Eurozone dream of monetary union and free movement of goods fostered incredible integration. But the 2008 financial crisis exposed the cracks in this ambitious dance. Austerity measures sparked public discontent, and populist winds began to blow, exemplified by Brexit and the rise of Eurosceptic parties. The Green New Deal and post-pandemic recovery plans offer a chance for the EU to rediscover its unity, focusing on climate change and sustainable growth. Navigating diverse national priorities and overcoming the skepticism sown by populism remain critical challenges in this ongoing economic performance. The political pendulum may swing, but the clock never stops ticking on jobs. The world of work is no longer a static stage. From 1970 to 2022, U.S. unemployment averaged 5.8%, while China hovered around 4.6%, and the EU at 7.5%. These numbers mask the dramatic shifts within each region. Automation in factories replaced manual labor. Service industries like tourism and healthcare boomed, and the gig economy, with its Uber rides and freelance projects, exploded. While income inequality widened, China saw a remarkable rise in middle-class jobs. While EU unemployment plunged after the 2008 crisis, but resurfaced with the pandemic. The challenge for all nations, ensuring job security and fair wages in this ever-evolving landscape. While the job market war continues its complex steps, innovation leaps onto the stage, raising both hopes for productivity and fears of displacement. From 2016 to 2021, the U.S. poured 3.5% of its GDP into research and development. China topped global charts with 4.1%, and the EU averaged 2.2%. These investments birthed revolutionary technologies like AI, biotechnology, and renewable energy. While robots boosted productivity and competitiveness, anxieties surfaced. Would machines replace humans? Can new industries absorb displaced workers? The race for technological supremacy isn't without its pitfalls, demanding careful management of disruptions and equitable access to its fruits. The race for economic dominance can't ignore the environment. Between 1990 and 2017, U.S. carbon emissions averaged 15 tons per capita. China reached 7.7 tons, and the EU at 7.3 tons. Climate change, resource depletion, and pollution threaten our shared future. The shift towards clean energy, resource efficiency, and circular economy models is no longer a choice, but a necessity. Each region is grappling with its own environmental challenges, from China's air pollution to the EU's dependence on fossil fuels. The urgent task: decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation and embracing sustainable practices for the benefit of all. 50 years may seem like a chapter, but in the story of human endeavor, it's just a thrilling prologue. We danced with robots, traded across continents, and dared to dream of a better world. The challenges ahead are real, but so is our indomitable spirit. Together, let's break down walls, bridge divides, and build an economy that celebrates diversity, rewards innovation, and cherishes our shared planet. The human story is far from over, and the next 50 years promise to be the most captivating act yet. If you're still watching this video, you must be pretty addicted to economics already. So give in to the temptation, hit that subscribe button, and let's get nerdy together.